If you work patrol out of Williams Lake in January, you get used to long stretches of dead air. At 3:47 in the morning, between McLeese Lake and Quesnel on Highway 97, there is virtually nothing moving. It was 22 below zero. The asphalt was dry black ice, the kind that looks completely clear until your back end steps out half an inch. I was parked on a gravel turnout just past Marguerite, letting the cruiser idle with the heat running full blast, finishing a cup of lukewarm gas station coffee while running log sheets. The first thing that happened wasn't visual. It came through the regional emergency band. Our radios are programmed to scan municipal, forestry, and standard distress frequencies across the interior. Out of nowhere, the speaker hissed open with violent, unmodulated static. Over top of it, a voice cut through. It wasn't a standard Mayday call. It was a man shouting 3 distinct numbers, completely breathless, followed by heavy metallic groaning, and a sound like high-pressure air ripping through a narrow valve. Then the transmission cut. Not faded out, cut dead. At that exact second, the low-voltage sodium lights at the rest stop 300 meters ahead blinked twice and died. Across the tree line to the west, where the main BC Hydro transmission corridor runs parallel to the highway, 3 massive flashes of pale green illuminated the cloud base. The whole corridor went pitch black. My first thought was a downed private Cessna or an unlogged cargo charter out of Prince George, clipping a high-voltage line. We get small twin-engine planes moving between private strips up here all the time. If someone had an alternator fire or ran out of fuel, they usually aim for the valley. I keyed my mic to call Prince George Dispatch, assuming we'd be rolling search and rescue out toward the Fraser River benches. The mic clicked, but there was no return tone, just a flat, low-frequency hum. The repeater on Dragon Mountain was down. I put the cruiser in gear and pulled back onto the northbound lane, keeping my speed around 70. If a light aircraft had clipped a tower, the line would be lying across the asphalt somewhere within the next 10 kilometers. The road was entirely dark now. No farmyard yard lights, no distant reflection off highway signs, just black spruce on both sides, eating up my high beams. About 4 kilometers past the turnout, the air inside the cabin began to vibrate. It wasn't a rumble through the chassis, like a heavy logging truck approaching around a bend. It was atmospheric pressure shifting against the side glass. The spruce tops along the western ditch bent sideways all at once, not from wind, but from a massive displacement of air pushing downward into the valley. I slowed down, rolled my window down an inch, and the noise hit me. It was not a propeller engine. It was the deafening, continuous roar of multi-stage turbofans running at full emergency thrust, echoes bouncing off the rock cuts. I looked up through the windshield. Dropping out of the cloud deck at barely 500 feet wasn't a private plane. It was a commercial transport jet, completely dark, except for one flickering amber beacon on the lower fuselage. The silhouette was massive, wide-bodied, and descending at an angle that made no sense for the terrain. Its landing gear was already down, locking into place with an audible hydraulic slam that cut right through the engine scream. The pilot wasn't trying to circle back toward an airstrip. In total darkness, with the power grid dead beneath them, they were using the straight stretch of Highway 97 as an emergency runway. I slammed the brakes. The cruiser slid 20 feet on the frost before catching the shoulder. The jet was coming directly down the center line of the highway, heading straight at me. Its wingspan was wider than the cleared right-of-way. The outboard engine on the starboard side was already clipping the tops of 30-foot lodgepole pines, throwing showers of pulverized wood and blue sparks into the dark behind it. I grabbed the handheld radio, screaming my unit number and the mile marker into the handset, trying desperately to trigger any automated relay or emergency frequency. Nothing, just dead carrier static. The scale of it didn't register until the main gear touched the asphalt 300 yards ahead of me. The sound was like a freight train derailing on solid rock, tires exploding against frozen pavement, the nose dropping violently, the massive titanium engines scraping the yellow dividing lines. The smell of atomized Jet A fuel and scorched rubber hit the cruiser's vents instantly. The plane was yawing hard to the left, the starboard wing dropping as it sheared clean through a row of wooden hydro poles. I threw the cruiser into reverse, tires spinning uselessly against the ice. The last thing visible through the windshield was the underside of that starboard wing, slicing through the darkness, 5 feet off the ground, sweeping across the entire width of the road. The official report, released 8 months later, listed an uncontained multi-system electrical fire that crippled the transponder, flight navigation, and long-range communication over the interior plateau. The crew had no instrumentation, no cabin power, and were flying entirely blind over mountain terrain until they caught a visual gap in the overcast. They survived the belly slide into the muskeg past the tree line. What the public inquiry never fully answered was the communication log from NAV Canada. Their records showed automated emergency alerts were routed to regional RCMP dispatch 16 minutes before the descent began. But because of a routine server update scheduled at 3:30 a.m. in the regional routing center, the critical warnings were placed into a pending delivery queue. They sat on a silent computer terminal in Vancouver, waiting for a manual release code that nobody was awake to send.